you talk for so long, I was like, I'm gonna go get a glass of water, and then I
Oh,
I'm listening, and it's
okay.
like you just end up like, damn it. So sorry, I ran back. Sorry, I was
Didn't mean to mess up your train of thought there.
no, not at all. I was just thirsty. Hard to turn
Ah,
off. So we're just
okay.
looking. We're looking real quick at this Andreas Osiander. If you don't know who he is, he's supposedly, if you go to any of the Copernicus's works in English, you'll notice that right in the preface is a foreword by Andreas Osiander to the reader concerning the hypothesis of this work. And then he goes on explaining how, and we'll talk about it in a second, how it's not meant to be real, it's not meant to be believed. Now, the story is, the original book, when it came out, there was no Andreas Osiander. Okay, so the original work, people thought it was Copernicus that wrote it. And how are we to know it wasn't? We don't know. This is just something they came along after and said, oh, it's actually this other guy who wrote that. It's like, what do you mean? It's just at the beginning of his book and some other guy wrote it? Well, the whole story is just ridiculous. The whole story is that this guy was in charge of the publication. It says right here in 1543, Osiander oversaw the publication of the book on the revolution of the spheres by Copernicus. He added a preface suggesting that the model described in the book was not necessarily true or even probable, but was useful for computational purposes. This was certainly not the opinion of Copernicus, certainly not, who was probably unaware of the addition. So now the author of a book is not aware that somebody's just going to write something at the beginning of it. As a result, many readers unaware of Osiander was the author of the preface believed that Copernicus himself had not believed that the hypothesis was actually true. Osiander did not sign the preface added to the Copernicus book, therefore many readers at the time assumed that it was Copernicus that had actually thought this himself. I mean, if there's a publisher, a book publisher, somebody publishes a book, you're an author, how quickly would this guy be on his ass? Here's my book, I'm going to do this as the author, and then somebody writes a preface that says, shouldn't be believed, this book. The guy would have lost everything. You can't just write somebody's preface of his book and not sign, you didn't even sign his name. And so after the fact, of course, we're told Copernicus wrote this on his deathbed, which would never happen. Just as insane to think that somebody would sit around on something like this their entire life and then say, okay, now I'm about to die. Now I'm going to write exactly what I feel is going on, and I'm going to pass away and let my gift be. It's just not the way things work. People don't write things on their deathbed. People don't just, it just doesn't happen, in my opinion. It's just a bullshit story. And so you get the Osiander added to it, but let's read that part, because maybe, remember, this could be written by Copernicus. It certainly looks to be. Sure, they added this guy's name years after, but it says, to the reader concerning the hypothesis of this work, there have already been widespread reports about the novel hypothesis of this work, which declares that the Earth moves, whereas the Sun is at rest in the center of the universe. Hence, certain scholars, I have no doubt, are deeply offended and believe that the liberal arts, which were established long ago on a sound basis, should not have been thrown into confusion. But if these men are willing to examine the matter closely, they will find that the author of this work has done nothing blameworthy, for it is the duty of an astronomer to compose the history of the celestial motions through careful and expert study. So they're trying to figure out the motion of the lights in the sky, right? Then he must conceive and devise the causes of these motions or hypothesis about them. Since he cannot in any way attain the true causes, he will adopt whatever suppositions enable the motions to be computed correctly from the principles of geometry for the future as well as the past. The present author has performed both these duties excellently, for these hypotheses need not be true, nor even probable. On the contrary, if they provide a calculus consistent with the observations, that alone is enough. Perhaps there is someone who is so ignorant of geometry and optics that he regards the epicycle of Venus as probable, or thinks that it is the reason why Venus sometimes precedes and then sometimes follows the Sun by 40 degrees and even more. Is there anyone who is not aware that from this assumption it necessarily follows that the diameter of the planet at perigee should appear more than 4 times, and the body of the planet more than 16 times as great as the apogee? Yet this variation is refuted by the experience of every age. In this science there are some other no less important absurdities, which need not be set forth at the moment. For this art, it is quite clear, is completely and absolutely ignorant of the causes of the apparent non-uniform motions, and if any causes are devised from their imagination, as indeed very many are, they are not put forward to convince anyone that they are true, but merely to provide a reliable basis for computation. However, since different hypotheses are sometimes offered for one and the same motion, for example, eccentricity and the epicycle of the sun's motion, the astronomer will take as his first choice that hypothesis which is the easiest to grasp. The philosopher will perhaps rather seek the semblance of truth, but neither of them will understand or state anything certain unless it has been divinely revealed to them. And then you get this final paragraph, which is just fantastic. Therefore, alongside the ancient hypotheses, which are no more probable, let us permit these new hypotheses also become known, especially since they are admirable as well as simple and bring with them a huge treasure of very skillful observations. So far as hypotheses are concerned, let no one expect anything certain from astronomy which cannot furnish it, lest he accept as truth ideas conceived for another purpose, and depart from the study a greater fool than when he entered it. Farewell. So again, you can believe that that's Copernicus who wrote that, or Andreas Osiander, who kind of snuck one in before the book was printed, a bunch of nonsense. And regardless of who wrote it, what they're saying is absolutely the case, that for years and eons, all the way back, that the ideas that they were presenting were just ways to compute the motions of the stars. They were not saying that there's a planet of Saturn that you can go to and live on, and it's got rings which are made up of rocks, and they've got moons, and no, that wasn't the point of any of it. Where that was hijacked, I don't know. Where somebody said, let's tell people this is real, probably when they realized there's money in it. Hey, there's money if we make people think that there's Saturn and Jupiter, and we can send probes out there, and that would be very expensive, take pictures of these beautiful planets out there. But nobody ever intended that. They were intended to give you an idea of where the lights in the sky would be computationally, mathematically. And then I wanted to show you here just real quick that, remember, Newton came up with gravity in
I was gonna say, did Oleander write the beginning to the Principia as well?
Yeah, exactly. And what year was the Principia? 17?
I think so. I can check.
Yeah, just check if it's, I don't know if it's 1700 or 1600. I think it was 1730s or something. But I just want to show you that, remember, if it's...
Yeah, 1728.
Okay, so if you've got Newton...
Oh, no, 1687. Wait a minute, that was the published in English, 1728. It was originally published in 1687.
Okay, 1687. So that's 200 years after Copernicus wrote this book. And supposedly Newton was the one who came up with gravity, right? But let's just look at Copernicus, and he's talking about how the Earth forms a single sphere with water. So you'd be like, yeah, how does that happen? Since you don't know about gravity, right? And it tells you flat out here that things all pull to the center. That there's, that's how mass works. It's like, wait a second, then this guy knew about gravity. And then you really look back further in time and you realize gravity means weight. And that they've known about gravity for years and years. What did Newton do by saying that it's inversely proportional to the distance between? Well, that's not really that much greater than what these guys were doing. They were already describing it. They knew it. They said, the Earth, together with its surrounding waters, must in fact have the shape as its shadow reveals, for its eclipses of the moon with the arc as a perfect circle. Therefore, the Earth is not flat. So now remember this too. Remember that nobody thought the Earth was flat. So what is Copernicus giving a whole chapter of his book to why the Earth is spherical if nobody thought the Earth was flat? Every scholar from 2,000 years ago, well, then Copernicus wasted a whole chapter talking about something that no crazy person except for desert wandering nomads believed. But his whole chapter is the Earth too is spherical, and why it's spherical, and that this happens on no other figure, and the reasons why, and it's just nonsense. So here, we're just going to get down to here, and he even names a bunch of people who thought that it was flat. So he says, therefore the Earth is not flat as Empedocles, I don't know how you say, Empedocles and Anaximenes thought, nor drum-shaped as Leucippus or Heraclitus, nor hollow in any other way as Democritus, nor cylindrical as Anaximander. I thought that nobody thought it was different than a sphere for all these 2,000 years, but not according to this. Now, and it's just, and constantly throughout this, here's the funny thing, he uses the word gravity. So he's using the word gravity throughout the whole book.
Wow.
That's ridiculous. It's like, I'm going to do a search real quick for gravity, just to see the use of the word. Okay, so it's in 6 times in the book, and it's talking about here, they also assert that the Earth bulges out to some extent, as it does, because it is not of equal weight everywhere on account of its cavities, its center of gravity being different from its center of magnitude. But they err through ignorance of the yardage. So it's like, okay, so you already knew about gravity. For they do not realize that the water cannot be even 7 times greater and still leave any part of the dry land unless the Earth as whole vacated the center of gravity and yielded that position to water. Here's just nonsense. He's saying that the Earth must be much more Earth than water, which is not what they believe now. Now it's 75% water.
Of course.
Right. Moreover, there is no difference between the Earth's centers of gravity and magnitude. This can be established by the fact that by the fact that from the ocean inward, the curvature of the land does not mount steadily in a continuous rise. If it did, it would keep the seawater out completely and in no way permit inland seas. Just nonsense. Talking more here about the water together press with a single center of gravity, that the Earth has no other center of magnitude, and that since the Earth is heavier, its gaps are filled with water. Just talking about gravity. I just think it's hilarious that the stories that we're told don't match at all. With here he's talking about, question arises whether the center of the universe is identical with the center of terrestrial gravity, or if with some other point. So he's talking about the center of the Earth being the pulling force that's pulling everything to the Earth's surface, water, people. So this is 200 years before Newton. For my part, I believe that gravity is nothing but a certain natural desire, which the divine providence of the creator of all things is implanted in parts to gather as a unity and a whole by combining in the form of a globe. This impulse is present, we may suppose, also in the sun and moon and other brilliant planets, so that through its operation they remain in the spherical... I'm sorry, did I read that right way? They remain in that spherical shape which they display. Nevertheless, they swung around their circuits in diverse ways. If then the Earth too moves in other ways, for example about a center, its obvious motions must likewise be reflected in the many bodies outside of it, basically saying that it will affect the gravity of everything outside of it. It's just ridiculous that the stories were told. So I wanted to show that because I think it's hilarious. But read this. I'm at geo.utexas.edu. It's a very short read if you ever want to read Copernicus's book. And I think reading Newton's book is worth it. I think there's things said in Newton's book that absolutely refute the heliocentric model also. And the fact that they didn't know the distance of the moon or the sun. Do you see Copernicus telling us the distance of the sun? No, in fact, he thought it was 3 million miles. And so that's nowhere near 93. But if this is such a perfect geometry and it's also laid out so perfectly, why wouldn't... And you'll hear Red's rhetoric tell us, well, they knew it because of trigonometry. That's easy to figure out. We can just triangulate the distance. We can, but none of these guys knew it. These great, these great geometers of all time and these mathematicians... Newton didn't know the distance to the sun. Newton said it doesn't matter if it's 12 or 53, it'll suit us either way. So how is that the greatest mathematician ever who couldn't figure out the distance to the sun, but now we just believe that, well, now we can. Now we can because in 1600 somebody sent somebody down the road, a couple thousand miles. We know the distance, it's over boats. That's another thing, people. Do you really think that you could map distances in boats? Like the distances in terrestrial land, sure, you can do that. But before there was planes or anything, that was all just guesswork. You can't get in a boat and map distances. It's just not possible. They just couldn't do it. They would have been off by hundreds of miles over short distances and thousands of miles over, half-Earth distances. Easily. Because you don't know the current, you don't know the wind, you don't know how much it's affecting you. I just think it's absolutely insane that we believe that people actually were out there, even today, mapping oceans. I don't know, maybe that's just me.
Well, it seems like Newton and Copernicus were intellectually honest enough to say, this is theoretical, it's hypothetical, it does meet the observations, but that doesn't mean that it should be taken as gospel. And, that seems like an honest scientific sort of admission. But at some point, history and especially theoretical science history was sort of hijacked, it seems like after the fact, where people now believe that everyone knew, the whole globe Earth thing for thousands of years. But, obviously that wasn't the case, or they wouldn't have put these caveat statements in. They wouldn't have made these admissions that, this is just theoretical, so take it with a grain of salt. And it really just flies in the face of the whole argument that, everyone, you stupid flat earthers, everyone knew the Earth was a globe for thousands of years. And yet we can point to evidences like, well, the oldest known globe wasn't even built until, again, coincidentally, 1492. So, the whole thing to me is it's very questionable. And anyone who points back to like Copernicus and Newton to bolster the globe Earth position, really needs to go back and read what these guys were saying, because they'll be honest, and they'll say, it doesn't matter how far the sun is, and if you claim that, or profess that the sun is a certain size and distance, then you can build a mathematically correct model around all of that, and all of the values will change, but it will still be mathematically correct. So, what can you do?
And what year was that book even? What year did that come out? They said the year of his death, right? So it would have been around 15 something. I'm just wondering how long was it after 1492?
The Principia?
No, now I'm looking at the revolution of whatever, revolution of the
Oh,
spheres. Looks like 1543.
yeah,
So 50 years after the New World was discovered, around there. I was just looking at that. So certainly interesting
right,
that all these things kind of line up. And then it'd be very easy if you were ever going to fake something. As far as somebody wrote something at a certain, you would just make them do it on their deathbed. We'd all wait till John died, and then we'd say, "Oh, here's a book that John wrote on his deathbed. He believed all the stuff that we've written on his behalf." And it's just too easy to me. I just don't picture anybody doing that, especially if he was coming out. He wrote a letter to the Pope at the beginning that said, like, I don't mean any disrespect, and I don't mean to be. Well, if you're going to write that, then you can write that before you die. Like, you're already saying to the Pope, "Hey, I'm not trying any disrespect. I don't mean to go against it." It just seems to me like such a good story that's told about the whole idea of how science has triumphed over religion, and it just seems like such a story to me. It doesn't seem legit. And then when you really look at it, and you look at who's the one that went around preaching all this new science, it was the Jesuits. They're the ones that
right,
started the science. So why science can't see that, and science is just like blind to the fact of pretty much it's the Jesuits that started all these observatories that went and changed the minds of the Japanese and the Chinese, who at least as far as my research has shown, they believed in a flat Earth. I mean, is that going to be erased now? Is it going to be hard to find? And I can't remember the name of the flat Earth, but I don't know if I can find it. But that was their belief up until these Jesuits came and changed, the way that they believed it. I'm trying to see if I can find the name of it real quick.
well, it almost makes you wonder if there is some coincidence or not, with the whole missionary spreading of the Judeo-Christian gospel. It almost seems like at some point along with that came the little globes in every classroom. And it would be just like this sort of MO of these people to mix in, sort of like a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? Mix in the whole globe Earth deception, with, from a religious sort of standpoint, if that makes any sense. But maybe not from a religious standpoint, but just using that whole missionary spreading of the gospel as an excuse to get other people into place and preach the globe Earth gospel. It may be worth looking into, because it really seems that at some point, history was really hijacked, and it makes you wonder, what is the point of keeping this big conspiracy going? Because even to this very day, NASA and others like them are proactively keeping the deception going with all the fakery and stuff. Whereas under most conditions, the whole globe Earth theory is so well ingrained into our society and into our educational system that it is perpetuated just sort of passively. It's passed on from generation to generation as a known fact, in quotes. And yet NASA and others still find it necessary to proactively perpetuate the deception. And so what is the motive? What's the point? And I really think that at first it may have been something honestly scientific and theoretical that was being debated and considered in order to answer these really important questions. But again, at some point, that was hijacked, and the history of what happened also appears to have been tampered with. And so we really are not in a good position to start looking back in history to prove things. We need to look at the world and study and measure the world in order to prove things. And clearly, when you do scientific experiments in reality, you're always going to come back with results that are, that jive with a flat and motionless Earth. And yet you have the dogmas of science screaming and preaching and pontificating this whole ball Earth theory. And so, while the truth is very simple here and easy to understand, there's just this huge, massive empire built around the fallacious globe Earth theory. And so, what is the motive? Beyond the point where I think it started as being a natural progression of science to where it is a deception, I think that it's really to keep people in, to control people. It's sort of the fence around the pasture. It keeps people from venturing out beyond what the known world has to offer. And I think that the powers that be will keep people in this corral for as long as possible. And so that, to me, I think is why NASA has continued this deception, the last 50, 75 years or whatever, is to keep people under this control.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, if I see some guy going around every day telling everybody, I didn't sleep with Mary, I didn't cheat on my wife with Mary, and he's telling you that every day, eventually you're going to look at the guy and be like, I think that guy slept with Mary. Because what the hell is he doing that for? And I look at the scientific world the same. That everything they do is about squashing the flat earth belief. It's everything that they do. They have to make fun of it. They have to have these guys get up and drop a microphone. And everything about it is like they, first of all, they taught us all that it was ridiculous belief, that only ancient people believed it, that it's stuff that the Bible believed. And they're trying to push this whole idea, whereas it's like, dude, if your globe is true, then what do you care? What do you care about any of it? Why do you have to have trolls that are going into each person's chat with tons of sock puppet accounts and making funny names about all of us, and Jeran's a shill and Jeran steals money, and that's your whole goal in life? Well, it's pretty obvious that to do that, either you've been put in that position to do that, or you're doing it because you're so afraid of something. Because you don't see me going in making shill accounts like the globe is this, and trying to go to NASA videos to like troll their chat. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Where would you ever find the time to do that sort of thing?
No
I mean,
idea.
really.
How do you sleep at night if you do that? I just couldn't even imagine. Like, I believe in free speech, so you can speak about anything you want. So can your brother, so can your grandmother and your father. Speak about whatever you want. And if it's something that is crazy, then people are going to stop listening to you. Period. And that's how faithful I am in humanity. But I believe that everyone has a chance to hear everybody out. Meaning, if I'm saying, hey, I think that you've been lied to about space, people have every right to hear me say that. And for you to come along and try and stop that in any way that you are can only be a detriment to society. Because if you're so afraid that I'm lying to people and that they're going to come and then they're going to believe the lie too, and we'll take over the world with our lies, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. People are going to go out and test for themselves, and they're going to determine for themselves. But I want to kind of warn them of some of the things that I see set up, which are purposeful experiments that you'll stumble on that can show the globe. That doesn't mean it's proof. Again, you could find John's shoe at a murder scene, and he has nothing to do with that murder. Now, is it evidence that his shoe's there? Sure. But it doesn't mean he has anything to do with the murder. So the same thing is true with the globe. Yeah, can you find that the sun sets at 270 west every equinox? Yes. Does that mean it's a globe? No. That's just one of the things that the Earth does. But people are hijacking those and saying, Wolfie's saying that the little light on that wing proves that the Earth's a ball. Can you imagine? Can you imagine saying that? This proves the Earth's a ball because there's a little bit of light on the top of my wing, and the globe Earth is a disaster now and it's dead because of this little wing on my plane. There's no way that light can be different than I understand it. I understand all reflections and light and the way it comes and the way it travels. I'm that smart. By the way, we also know the age of the Earth and the age of the universe, and we know the animals that came first and how they all evolved into today. I mean, it's just a crazy belief that you think we live in that 100-year period of time where humans know those kind of answers. Like, we've just lived on this earth for thousands of years, and now we live in the 100-year period of time where we're smart enough to just rewind time. We just look with our telescopes and we just rewind time back to when the earth or when everything exploded from nothing. We know all this. We know it's 14 billion years ago. Obviously the universe has never changed. The operation and order, everything has to remain as it has been. There's never been any changes or any kind of mass extinctions that may have changed the laws of physics. No, everything has to be the way we say, and you better believe us because it's fact. That's crazy. The fact that they don't preface everything they say with anything historical science with, we think that the best idea might be, That's how you should start. Before you talk about evolution, you should say, we think that maybe the best thing that we can come up with is not saying anything is a fact. Fact, you didn't witness anything. You don't witness any of that, and you're just going to tell us it's true, and you know the age of the Earth, and we can date these rock strata, and we know that the Earth, give me a break. It's a joke. So just in this real quick, I went to this page here, Buddhism's Flat Earth Cosmology. Not sure the date of the article, just seeing if it's like before Flat Earth Talk. I don't really know. 2015, July. But very interesting, just here if you read this. This was the standard Buddhist cosmology until modern times, and even today, some have reinterpreted it as being what those with pure vision perceive, as it would otherwise run contrary to the recorded infallible statements of the Buddha in Scripture. Some would also suggest that Buddhists did not take Mount Meru cosmology as representative of the physical world, but this ignores works like the Sastra, which explain observable physical processes like the waxing and waning of the moon as being a result of the sun coming close to the waning or extending away the waxing from the moon, along with their perpetual clockwise circuits. The sun is in the outer circuit. In other words, ancient Buddhists believed that the physical world was flat, stationary, and that there were 4 continents surrounding an enormous hourglass-shaped Mount Meru atop the... So it's like, we don't hear any of this. It's all been swept under the rug. It's all, no, nobody's ever believed it, and only these desert wanderers. You don't ever hear, oh, well, Buddha thought that it was flat. The fact that they have to hide this shit, sweep it under the rug, make up stories, change Copernicus. I mean, what we all learned in school is different today than what we learned in school. If that doesn't make you say, there's a problem here, why? And then they blame it on Washington Irving. Oh, it's because Washington Irving wrote this book. So we all learned lies because of one guy's book? Give me a break. That's not how it would work. You wouldn't, well, this guy wrote a book, so now we're going to teach all the children lies until we come out with the fact that the guy was lying, and then we'll just tell everybody that it actually didn't go down the way we think it did. It's just ridiculous. You have to recognize that as they're changing the story as they go along because it no longer fit what they wanted it to be fit with. Just like when people start finding out what kind of person Columbus really is, saddest thing in the world, the United States still has a Columbus Day. I mean, if there's not a bigger joke in the world than somebody who never set foot in America, number one. Number two, chopping up little babies and little children, and for no reason other than to enslave people and telling jokes and writing back, hey, we can enslave all these Indians because they'll give us anything for free. I mean, this is not the person that should be celebrated ever, at all. Piece of garbage. And how wrong was he? He thought he hit India. He thought he'd gone west and supposedly hit India, and he didn't even come close to that. So, I mean, why this guy is celebrated anyway. But regardless, the point was they've changed the story. And when you find people start doing that, and when they're demonizing certain thought processes, you know, I mean, how can you not disagree with the idea that if they tell you something's bad for you, look into it. Look into it because it might be good for you. If that's how bad it's gotten in this world, that if they tell you something is good for you, I'd be weary of it. And if they tell you something's bad for you, I'd look into it. Because they have turned the world upside down. It's a Masonic thing to do, and that's all you gotta look at too is the Masons, and what is they're saying? On the level. Oh, the Masons are on the level. And their picture, their famous picture, is the checkerboard. You ever seen a checkerboard floor? I mean, a checkerboard floor is exactly what we've been talking about when we say they hijacked perspective and called it curvature. Because when you look at a checkerboard floor, let me bring one up here. When you look at the floor, you'll notice that it looks like it falls away from you. See that? It looks like you're on a ball. And yet people are just blind to the fact that this is one of their big, why would it be a checkerboard? Why are they on the level? You know, we need to think outside the box here and realize these guys are just tricking us in our face. They know the truth. They know they're on the level because the earth is level, because water is level, and they just laugh because people think they're on a ball. They think that they live on a space rock hurling through outer space that is going in circles, it's rotating on its axis, at the same time flying 66,000 miles per hour, which is just insane, around the sun, and that whole group is going around the universe at 480, and that whole group is going around. I mean, to believe that, think of the amount of evidence that we should require. And what is the evidence that we get? Well, Red's rhetoric can do a math equation. So you're on a planet that's spinning, and we've only drilled 8 miles deep, but we know what the core is. It's a molten iron, and we know exactly what each layer is because we send sound waves through, and we're smart enough to know exactly what they're hitting as they bounce back. Yet when they dig, they notice that the temperature goes up something like 50 degrees every couple miles, to the point where even at 10 or 15 miles deep, the temperature becomes too hot for anything to exist. If there's more evidence that you need that the Earth is all there is, it is all there is. There is no digging to the bottom of it. There's no digging through it. We don't need to talk about, oh, dig a tunnel and what would happen with gravity if we... No, you can't dig to the bottom of the Earth because it's all there is. You're going to get to a certain point and be like, yep, it's too hot. We can't get any further. So to me, it's just like obvious that we've been hijacked. The truth of the world that's right in front of you, that you wake up every day and see. And I'll go to my deathbed and say, I bet you everybody knew the Earth is flat. Everybody listening, you all knew the Earth was flat. We all knew it was from day one, but it was hijacked. It was stolen from you. It was inside you from the very beginning, but it was taken from you at 6 years old and continued to be pressed into your mind day in and day out with every movie and every commercial and every logo and every time. And whenever you say that the Earth is a sphere, make sure you say first, and we've always known that the Earth is a sphere, or say of course in front of it. Of course we know that the Earth is a sphere, because you say that enough times and then people will fight it to the death. They'll fight that it has to be a sphere because we've been told it for too damn long, and it's just ridiculous. You need to look at the world and say, let's erase what we've been taught and reassess things. And when you go out now with your P900 camera, go try and find a boat going over the edge. I dare you. And you'll see exactly what happens, which is a convergence at that line of diffraction, and it's being explained better and better every single day. And do we have the exact words or the exact way to describe it yet? No, because there's a lot of confusion going on there, but it's getting clearer. But you can see it yourself. It doesn't matter the words that we tell you. You can go see it yourself that boats do not go over the curvature of the Earth. They don't. That's not what happens. You can see that band of water. You can see what it's doing. You can see that it's a basic lensing, that it's covering. We can see examples of it. And we don't have any evidence of something being bent over the curvature of the Earth and being shown to you. Mountains aren't being raised up into the sky. Those are the kind of things that you have to believe if you're a heliocentric believer. That we don't see things that we think we see. We think we see them, but we don't really see them because they're hidden, and you're actually just seeing some sort of a mirage. Those buildings aren't really there. And then they'll talk, well, why are those buildings covered by water? It's like, no, the better question is, why are there buildings being shown to us at all? Because that's the problem, not the fact that half the buildings are covered by water. That's not a problem. That's just a problem of, okay, let's figure out what could be causing this optical phenomenon of water covering the buildings. The big problem is the fact that the globe calls for no buildings to be seen. You're not supposed to see any buildings in Chicago, but we do see them. So you can believe they're being raised up, or you can ask yourself the question of what other possibilities are there, and then you can go to like Good Times for All's channel. He has so many experiments and explanations where you can watch his channel. You can watch Wide Awake, one of the best channels for observations. I bring him up all the time. He doesn't have nearly enough subscribers, and I can't tell you the amount of time I've sat there and watched his videos, because that's when you'll finally see it. That's when it will come to you that everything that they've ever taught us about this water line and the boats behind it, it's nonsense. That you can see boats so much further than that hard line of water. So then you have to recognize, well, that's not the water line. So what is that line? Well, it's the end of your angular perception, or the angle that you can see things. Everything after that's not resolving. So then you say, well, why can I see some things? Well, you're seeing reflections of the sky, which make it look like it's behind the water, but it's just water reflecting the sky. You watch the sunset and you can see it kind of turn into that omega symbol, which then you start to realize, oh, the sun's not setting behind the curve. The sun actually hits the point where the horizon is and then melts into itself. You're actually seeing a reflection of the sun, which a reflection of a circle ends up looking like a circle. So you're like, oh, that's just the sun. Well, it's not the sun. It's the reflection of the top half of the sun being reflected as it goes away from you and kind of pinches out. Watch David Weiss's channel and you can see the sun fade out. It's not a matter of the size. People say, oh, he's not showing the size of the sun get smaller. We're not saying that the size gets smaller. We're saying it fades out. Okay, the sun fades out as it goes away from you. You don't get to see it from the ground because you're looking through too much of a atmospheric blockage. But if you get up higher in a drone on a mountain, watch the sun fades out. It fades away. The globe model does not call for that ever, at all. Ever in a million years, there's no call for that. So I'm getting carried away because I get pissed.
And I was going to say too, like when you watch the sunset from higher altitudes, it's almost like it does some northing as well, which does sort of match the AE projection.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's like